everyone, I'm Asia, and I am so excited to be here today and to talk to all of you. I just turned 25 on Tuesday, and I am an author and a poet, and my journey began, I'm going to kind of briefly go over it, when I was 8 years old. And I used to have a lisp and a stutter, and I would go to school and I started getting bullied for the way I spoke. And then as I got older, as social media became something that was like social currency and everyone had it and everyone was on it, the bullying escalated. And I suddenly dealt with bullying that was not just in person, but also physical bullying, cyberbullying, verbal bullying, all of it. And it really affected my mental health, and I didn't realize the impact that it had for so many years. During the time I was bullied, it wasn't something that was talked about the same way I think it is today, and so I didn't really tell anyone. And I also kind of thought that it was my fault because I couldn't understand why it was happening to me. So because I didn't tell anyone about it, I really struggled with it for many years. And when I was a freshman in high school, when I was 15 years old, I had transferred to another school, and there was a girl at the school that I used to go to that wound up dressing up as me for Halloween. And she posted a sign around her neck with my name on it and walked around the school. And suddenly this was posted online, and I was bombarded with all of these death threats and hate comments and cyberbullying attacks. And I didn't know what to do. And I hit this really, really dark place at that time in my life. And then I started opening up about what I had gone through. I told my parents, I started telling a few friends, and slowly it became this journey of realizing that I had dealt with bullying for so many years and that I was struggling with my mental health because I hadn't told anyone, I hadn't done anything, and I was suffering. So before I go more into my story, how I became a writer, how I used my experience in my writing and bullying and all of that, I want to share a poem with you. So throughout the last few years, so I published this book, as I mentioned, The Survival Guide to Bullying. And I'm going to go into later how I published it and all of that. But when the book came out, I started speaking to schools all over the US. And I wanted to find a way to share my story with bullying in a more engaging way and just a more like full way, covering so many years. And I wrote my whole story with bullying into a 10-minute poem. And today I'm going to share a portion of that poem with you, not the whole thing, but a portion of it. And it's going to cover some of what I just talked about, but I hope you enjoy. I'm going to tell you a story about the power of words, about your own voice and being heard, the power to heal, the power to hurt. On Halloween of my freshman year, a girl I had never met who attended my old school dressed up as me as her costume. And suddenly it was like someone pressed resume. I was all consumed by cyberbullying, harassment, and my past. You see, I'd spent 8 years being bullied. Crowds would amass to telecast hate, try to obliterate their very own classmate. And so when this happened, I sunk into my chair, defeated with this blank stare in my eye, thinking, this is it. I can't keep trying to get by. A few weeks later, my life would change. It was a regular day, nothing strange, till I read the news about a boy. 16 years old, he couldn't hold on any longer, couldn't be any stronger. It said, suicide due to bullying. And something in me said, Asia, you can't wait any longer. You see, I know what it's like to lose your fight, and I know what it's like to take back your life. But how could I let kids struggle every day without showing them that it's going to be okay? I couldn't find the answer. How do I help kids around the world? What is the answer? Do I have a voice? I didn't know. Do I have the power? I won't let go, but I'm not going to lie. I was hesitant from head to toe. And then my mom said to me, Asia, you got to be brave. Share your story. If not you, who will share the story of the millions of kids bullied every single year? And suddenly it all became clear. And she said to me, who do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? What do you believe? I want to be who I needed when I was younger. I want to achieve more than I ever thought was possible. I believe in standing up, standing up. I'm not backing up, easing up, or shutting up. I'm going to make a change. So I put pen to paper, rearranged the thoughts that poured from my brain, and created a book that goes by the name, The Survival Guide to Bullying. The book Aija needed when she was 10, 12, 15. It just came a few years late, but hopefully it would show everyone else how to communicate, love their weight, their sexual orientation, or their growth rate. Because it doesn't matter what anyone says to you, whether you are gay, straight, trans, lost, found, alone, sad, scared, or different. We are all different, unfinished, sufficient. We all fight our own battles each day. We all must be accepting of our wounds that don't always fade away. So I'll leave you with this and say, I promised myself that I would take a stand, try to save others by holding out my hand, but I cannot fix this problem on my own. I need people like you to get up, hold your head high, raise your hand, and say, I will not let another kid feel like someone else's prey. Whether you are the bully, the bullied, or the bystander, today is a new day. Stand up, don't back down, and be brave. So that's a portion of the poem that I mentioned. And to kind of take you back a little bit, so I was bullied for about 8 years. And as I mentioned, during that time, I didn't speak up for myself. I did a little bit in the beginning, but because I was bullied for the way I spoke, I very quickly stopped. Eventually, I kind of lost hope that anyone would understand my experience or that anyone was going through the same thing, which looking back was so wrong because there were so many people in my school and in my community that were being bullied as well. But I very quickly gave up on myself. And part of that, I think, was that in my school, like at the time, students could bully each other and teachers wouldn't do anything. They would watch it happen or they would contribute to it. And so it was a really toxic environment where that just was allowed to happen. And as I wrote my book and tried to figure out, so when I started writing my book, I was 16 years old. And as I mentioned, I saw this story about this boy that had taken his life because of bullying. And I knew that pain and that hopelessness, but I also knew that there was a way to survive it. And I was so angry and I was so heartbroken that this boy, that no one showed up for him and that he had given up and he had taken his life. And I wanted to find a way to show young people all around the world that you could survive it and that there are and there were ways to get help, to stand up for yourself, even if it didn't seem possible. And so I started writing this book and I wrote it kind of like a diary in the beginning. I had no idea that it would ever be published. But I just wrote the book that I kind of wished I'd always had, but I never did have. And then I self-published it, which I want to talk about a little later because I know many of you like to write yourself. But I self-published it and it was online, it was free to do. And then a few months after that, Scholastic bought the book, they published it, it came out, it became a bestseller. And I started speaking all over the US and I spoke to over 4 million people in 4 or 5 years. And I started to see that bullying existed everywhere and that it was this huge issue that wasn't talked about enough. Things weren't being done and that mental health was something that was really, really affected by bullying amongst obviously other things, but that bullying was really affecting students' mental health. And they were coming up to me after I would speak and telling me their stories. So I kind of want to go back to a few things that it's really important to remember when we talk about bullying. And that is that bullying affects so many millions of young people around the world. And that so many of those young people, like statistics have shown, they don't ask for help. They they don't report it, they don't stand up for themselves. And a lot of that is because there is this fear that if you stand up for yourself, nothing is going to change or you'll get bullied more. But 50% of the time, if you stand up for someone that is being bullied, that person will never be bullied again. Bullying really is this cycle where oftentimes the person that is bullied can also become the bully, can also become the bystander. And oftentimes we all are part of that cycle at some point in our life. And it's really, really, really important to stand up and say something when you see it, because you could literally be changing someone's life forever with just one sentence and you have no idea. For me, when I was going through it, no one stood up for me. And I really believe had someone said something, it really would have changed my experience. The other thing is that, you know, there's so many types of bullying, and I know because most of us are going to school from home or working from home now, cyberbullying is a huge problem, as I'm sure all of you know. And looking back on my experience, I really wish that I had taken more precautions with social media when I was in school, but instead I didn't. And I think it's really important to make sure that you block and report people that are bullying you, that you stand up for other people in the comments when you see it happen, because although you might think that a lot of people, you know, think that whatever you're seeing with bullying online is wrong, if no one is standing up for someone, then it just seems like no one cares or everyone's in agreement. So it's really important to take that stand online, even if you think it's not going to make a difference. It really does. And oftentimes it makes people not contribute to cyberbullying that's going on. And using those block and report buttons, making sure that your account is private. That's something that obviously now, like, I have a big social media presence, but at the time when I was in school and I didn't always make my account private. And I really wish that I had, because it would have prevented like so much unwanted cyberbullying from happening. The other thing that I write about in my book is, you know, I know that we all live on social media and we love it, but sometimes it can get too much, and it can get too much for your mental health. And sometimes you don't even realize how cyberbullying can be affecting you. So taking a break, logging off, taking, like, I call it like a vacation from Instagram or TikTok or whatever it might be, can really, really, really help with your mental health. And it's something I really recommend you do if you're experiencing cyberbullying, or if you're just noticing that the more time you spend online, the more it's affecting you. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on is the way that bullying affects mental health is so enormous, and it's something that really isn't talked about enough. As I mentioned, there were so many years that I didn't tell anyone about what I was going through with bullying. And I did struggle with depression and anxiety, and because I kept it a secret, it just got worse and worse. And so when I started doing research to write my book, I started realizing that this was a really, really common problem, and that a lot of young people didn't know how to talk to someone in their life, how to ask for help, and how to continue having those conversations even when it seemed like no one was doing anything. So in my book, I write a lot about creating a top 5 list of the adults in your life that you trust. This could be anyone from a teacher, a guidance counselor, a family member, a neighbor, preferably an adult, and going to them and telling them what you're going through, how you're feeling mental health wise, thing like that. Or you know, there are like a lot of amazing online resources for therapy, but just basically having someone that can stand by your side and help you get through whatever it is you're dealing with. And so I just really, really encourage all of you to keep that list near you at all times, because even if it's not bullying related, we all go through things, and it's really important to make sure you have people that you can go to and ask for help. My biggest mistake was that I didn't talk about what I was going through, and I thought I could go through it alone, and it affected me really negatively because of that. But if for some reason you are in a moment of crisis or you don't have someone to go to, there are also really, really incredible resources. Crisis Text Line is one of them. I've worked with them before, and they are a 24/7 anonymous hotline that you can text. If you just Google Crisis Text Line, I believe the number is 741-741, and you send home in the text. and you can speak to a counselor if you are going through some sort of mental health crisis or struggle. That's always there for you. And also, you know, checking in on your friends, people within your school or community that you think might be having a really hard time, might be going through something that they're not expressing. People that check in with others in the community that they think, even if they're not sure, like those people could really be changing someone's life. And I just think it's really, really important to make sure that you are showing up for others in your school as well as yourself. Because in order to really conquer this issue, we have to come at it from all sides. And that is standing up for bullying when you see it happen, asking for help or reporting it when it happens to you, and also showing to my career. So I know a lot of you are writers and love writing. I always really liked writing, but I also have some learning disabilities. So in school, it was really hard for me in school, and I never thought that I would be a writer, or definitely never thought I would be a poet. But I was able to eventually make those dreams reality. And so I would write all the time when I was in school. And then when I was 16, as I mentioned, I started writing this book. But I would just write for fun. Like I didn't do it, you know, for any competitions or anything like that. So I would just write for fun. And then when I wrote this book, I decided to self-publish it, which is something that any of you can do. I use this website. Actually, I'm not going to say it because I don't really recommend the specific website that I use, but I know that people have had a lot of success with like Amazon, self-publishing and stuff like that. And essentially anyone can put their book up as an ebook. And I self-published it. And from there, my book was discovered by Scholastic, which was such a dream come true. But the other things that I did was I entered some competitions that like anyone can do, like the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And through that, I entered my poetry. And like, I think when I was a junior or senior in high school, I wound up winning a gold and silver medal from this competition. And those moments were so important for me because they showed me that me writing about my experience with bullying, with mental health, could actually had purpose, had validation. People liked it. People gave it an award. And I know that awards can, you know, they don't mean everything at all, but for someone that is really struggling with their self-worth and their life purpose, it was a huge moment for me. And so I think it's really awesome that if you do love writing and have this passion or any sort of creativity or arts or anything, to find amazing competitions like the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, which is free to enter. You enter it digitally, I believe, so like you can just do it from your computer, and things like that can be really amazing. And also to know that you can turn that passion project, that book that you want to write, that film you want to make, into something and share it on social media. There's so many incredible tools that we have now with technology. And over the last 7 years, like I had 0 followers and I built up to almost 250,000 followers by just sharing my poetry videos online. So there's just so many things that you can do with technology, and with finding alternative ways to share your story, to express your voice and yourself, and to use writing as a tool to make a difference, to make a change. And so I just really encourage all of you to remember that, to do that, to explore that, because it's a really incredible feeling to see that your writing and your words could actually make an impact. So yeah, that's a little bit about bullying, mental health, my journey with writing, but now I would love to do some questions. And see if any of you have some questions. Hi.
Aija, thank you so much for being with us. Shireen here with the Queer America Foundation. I know I can speak for everyone. That was incredible. We're honestly so happy to have you with us. Between the book, your story, all of the advice, which I think our students could really use, and so could family with us, educators. A lot of our students do write about bullying, either being on the receiving end or being a bully themselves. And I think that your advice is really invaluable. So thank you. I had questions of my own, but I'm actually excited to turn it over to the group. And if there's time for my questions, I will get them in. But definitely I know our time is limited and want to be able to open it up to the group. So.
Good.
Awesome. So my name is Jemica and I'm here helping out and co-moderating. So we have a question from Derek, who is going to ask it directly to you on camera. So we're going to go ahead and unmute him and let him share that with you.
Awesome.
Hi, Aija. Thank you so much for being here today. That was a
Thank you.
fantastic and powerful poem. Thank you so much for reading that today. And also, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
In listening to you tell your story, my question is definitely around the subject of mental health. And I want to know, with the declining mental health, how or where did you find the inner strength to speak up and start your writing? Was there someone who introduced you to it? Where did that come from, especially having such a negative view at the time?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. At the time that I was actually going through the bullying, I never would imagine that anyone would read my writing, because I was struggling so much at that point that for me, writing was just an outlet to try to express myself, to try to find some sort of meaning in what I had been dealing with and my own mental health journey. But as I use writing as a form of therapy, not to replace it by any means, but as a form of it, I started to build up my own self-worth and my own confidence. So that whole process took like 5 years, or it was a long time. But towards the end of that process, I would say more towards when I was a junior or senior in high school, I started to feel this sense of purpose in my writing. And I think a lot of people experience that when you find something that like you really love in life, that is your truth and that you have to speak it no matter what. And so for me, it took a very long time, and I don't encourage anyone to like rush that process, because I wouldn't have been ready to share my work before then. But when I got to that point, eventually, like I was ready, and nothing could replace that sense of like, I have to speak.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. We have another question from Albie in the chat. She says, "Hi, Aija. Really excited to have you with us today. What would you say to parents to help their child if he or she or them is being bullied?"
I'm really glad that you asked that, and I didn't touch on that. I usually do, but I'm so glad that you asked that. So number one, my mom noticed something was off with me during the years I was bullied, but I did not express it to her. I did not tell her, as I mentioned. And she could tell because I had, at certain points, I would like lose a lot of weight. I would kind of become more introverted in myself. I didn't want to see people. I didn't like leaving the house. I would wear baggy clothes. A lot of certain habits that I usually had about like expressing myself changed, and I was becoming much more inward and much more afraid to step out in the world as my normal self. And she would try to have these conversations with me. And again, like I was not good at expressing what I was going through. But I think if I could go back, one thing I wished had been done slightly differently, and nothing on her because she didn't know at all what was going on, was that oftentimes young people, I found, don't like to share their story when they feel like it's going to be made this huge deal and the parents are going to like go into the school or speak out on behalf of them, and suddenly they lose all control. And it's true that sometimes when a parent goes into school, things can be made worse. That certainly happened in my situation. I know so many stories of where that happened. So I think the biggest thing is whether your child has told you that something is going on or you just assume, to show them that you're going to be there. You're going to be that partner that is going to help advocate for them. You're going to be there every day to ask a question about their day, to have open conversation, and just assure them that that conversation stays between the two of you. I think creating that really tight-knit bond and relationship where they know they can come to you, they won't be judged, nothing will be taken out of their control, but you will together come up with solutions on how to navigate this, is like the most crucial thing. And through that, you'll help build that trust for where you can, take it to another step of maybe going into school or speaking to a teacher or something like that.
Awesome. Thanks again for that response. We have another question from a student, Alicia. She says, thank you so much for sharing your story, Aija. How did you build self-confidence and learn to love yourself?
That is still a journey I'm on. I am not there yet, but it's gotten a lot better in years. I would say some things that really helped me were when I was 17, I went to this acting storytelling class, and I'm very creative. I love writing. I love storytelling. And in that class, I met people that had had similar experiences to me and that liked the same things as me. And within that group, I found a sense of belonging. And through that, I built confidence. Like, oh, I can have friendships. I can, people like to see me express myself in this creative way, and they're supportive, and there's no bullying happening here. So that was a really life-changing experience for me. Another thing that I did and I continue to do is I went to therapy, and that was something I really needed to do and something that really has helped me and continues to help me. And now in this new world, there's so many online alternatives that I really, really recommend. And another thing that I did that I think has been really crucial is to work within myself on building my own relationship with myself. And this is obviously a much longer conversation, but really work on loving myself, whether that be through writing 3 pages every day about the things that I really love and admire within myself, or taking care of myself, whether it be mentally or physically, doing things to show yourself that you care for yourself. That's a mouthful, but you know what I mean. I think there's so many facets to building that confidence, and there's no one path, but I think it's important to just every day work on that. And as I said, I'm not there yet, but it's something I continue to do.
Aija, amazing. Thank you so much. With the chat is, we have several questions in the chat.
Awesome.
So I want to make sure we get to those. Molly, one of our students asks, Aija, if you had not been bullied, do you think you would view the world differently, and how?
Definitely. I always say the last chapter of my book is called The Benefits of Being Bullied, which I know sounds just ridiculous. But I think that from almost any negative situation in my own life, I have tried in the years following to find the positives I've taken from that. And what I've realized is that I would not be anywhere near who I am without my experience of being bullied. Not that I wished it had happened, and not that I wished it on anyone, but it did change me, and it changed the way I saw the world, the way I see people, and it brought me onto this path. So for that, I feel lucky that I got through it, and lucky that I've been able to share my story and my experience with other people.
I think we're all lucky that you were able to take that experience and put it into a book and share it with us with so much positive feedback and attitude. Another question from another student. Aija, you are super inspirational. I was wondering what process you went through to publish your writing. And that's from Aina Marzia.
First of all, thank you very much. I wrote The Survival Guide to Bullying over the course of 3 years. And then I self-published it, as I mentioned, online as an ebook. It's free to self-publish. I think I made it the cheapest price that I could make it, just so that everyone could have access to it. And yeah, it's something that, if you just Google self-publishing ebooks, it's something I really recommend. I don't recommend necessarily doing the print self-publishing because it's very expensive, and I just think we're all on our phones and computers and whatnot. So yeah, my experience with self-publishing was really good. It was really lucky because shortly after I did self-publish, Scholastic, which was like a dream publisher, picked it up and they bought the book. And then since then, my second book, Dear Girl, which is my first book of poetry, which came out like 2 weeks ago, I think, that I sold to a publisher called Andrews McMeel. So yeah, I started in the untraditional path and then have kind of wound up in the traditional path as of right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. We have a question that's going to be asked live to you by a student named Elizabeth Wright. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute her now.
Sounds good.
Hi. Your words were so inspirational. Thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted to ask your advice on a freshman who had past issues with being bullied by teachers, and then the students were influenced. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, so that's something that I also dealt with. I remember when I was in 8th grade, I would like raise my hand in class, and my teacher, because I had a lisp at the time, would be like, "What's that, Ava? What do you have to say?" Mimicking the way I spoke. And because of that, I completely shut down and I stopped speaking, stopped participating. It affected my grades, and students, as you mentioned, joined in. When it comes to that, I would say there are a few ways to handle it. One, you could kind of speak with some friends and like classmates of theirs to kind of speak to the teacher afterwards, like after class, and talk to them about why like that can't happen, or in class to have other people stand up along with the student, or to go to another teacher or another person in administration to talk about what is going on in the classroom and with the teacher. And then another alternative entirely would be to talk to the parent or family member and try to figure out a plan of like, you know, who do we speak to and stuff like that. So I think there are many ways, but I think it's really important to go with someone. I'm all for standing up for yourself, but sometimes it's much easier and has more impact when you have some friends or someone else join in with you. And remember that sometimes things aren't solved on the first try, which is really unfortunate, but it happened to me a lot. And to just please, please, please don't give up advocating for yourself or for your friend, to keep going in, keep having those conversations. Sorry, I hope I didn't break up. I just saw your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. No worries. I think this ties in really well with a question that we have in the chat from Ansley. And she asks, was it hard for you to open up to your mom or your trusted adult? Did you feel like you could talk to them easily?
It was really hard for me. And it was nothing that my mom and my family did at all, because they were there for me the whole time. But I had been so conditioned to believe that no one was going to do anything, or that it wouldn't have mattered, or that it was my fault, because that's the environment I was in at school. And after so many years of that, you start to believe that. But I really, really, really wished I was able to see past that, because all of those years, my parents were there. And even if they didn't fully understand, they would have done everything they could to try and understand. And it would have been better for sure than me trying to handle it on my own. So to answer your question, I didn't really tell my mom what was going on until that girl dressed up as me for Halloween. And I think on that day, something just changed in me, because I didn't even know this girl. So it was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I guess someone was calling me. I'm so sorry. I'm still very adjusting to Zoom and virtual stuff. And so for some reason, my phone or my computer was ringing. Anyway, so the day that cyberbullying incident happened, where this girl dressed up as me, I think I started to realize that this had gone past health-wise so intensely that I just kind of broke open and started telling my mom. And that was honestly a gift in disguise, because I had been keeping it all inside for way too long.
Eliza, also in the chat, she asks, since publishing your work, have you heard from any of your former bullies?
This is a question I always get, and unfortunately the answer is no. But I have gotten 2 messages from girls that were really popular in my school. And they were girls that I always looked at their life and I was like, wow, their life is amazing. They have so many friends. I wish that I had that life. And since then, I've gotten 2 messages from 2 different girls, and I don't think they know that they both sent these messages, saying that that they were dealing with bullying for so many years while I knew them or knew of them, and they never told anyone. And that my story showed them that they had been keeping this inside for so long, and that they had been really struggling. And for me, that was so eye-opening, because I always looked at these girls like they had this perfect life. And I wish that I had their friends and were in their circles. Meanwhile, they were struggling and no one knew. And that's the really sad thing about bullying, is that it's invisible sometimes. And it's so hard to know if someone else is going through something similar to what you're dealing with.
I think that's one of the things for me personally, just as an adult now, you know, I never really considered myself as being bullied. I was definitely never a bully. But there were times where I would find myself sort of on the outs with a friend group, right? And then suddenly you were sort of meant to feel alone, unwanted, find another group. And at the time, I never would have thought of that as bullying. But now when I look back, it was a very sort of, it was invisible even to me that I was being bullied, but the impact was still there. And so I wonder kind of what sort of advice you would have in that kind of situation.
Well, actually, first I want to touch on something that I forgot to say earlier, which I wanted to break down the 4 different types of bullying. So there are 4 different types of bullying. There is verbal bullying, which would be like teasing or taunting someone or harassing someone. There is physical bullying, which would be like any sort of physical harm. Cyberbullying, which is any type of bullying that happens online or on your phone. And then there's social bullying, which is a little bit more hard to pinpoint, because it is that like spreading rumors, excluding people. But the thing that makes, I don't know if any of you had this experience, but when I was growing up, a lot of adults would say, well, it's not bullying, it's kids being kids. It's a part of growing up. And that's really not true. And the thing that makes bullying different from a one-off incident of someone not being nice is that it happens over and over and over. It's repetitive. It's that you go into school every day and you are verbally bullied, you are socially bullied, you are physically bullied or cyberbullied, whatever it is, it happens over and over. So in response to your question, I would say for someone dealing with something like social bullying, where it's a little harder to see, and also it's a little harder to acknowledge within yourself, because you're like, I don't really know what's going on. Like, you know, is this just my friend group? Is first to really think about and maybe even write down everything that's been going on. Like, is it something that happened to me a lot when I was in middle school, is I'd sit down at the lunch table and everyone would get up and leave. So the first time that happened, I was like, oh, well, they wanted to move lunch tables. But then every day when that happened, and if I followed them, they would do the same thing over and over. That can be really, really detrimental to your mental health. And so writing down everything that happens, and then talking to maybe one person from that group, or going to a teacher or administrator in your school, or again, one of those trusted adults, and explaining to them that you don't really know what this is, but this is what's happening. It's really affecting you, and that you need to figure out what to do about it. And so whether that be someone within that direct like peer group or an adult, making sure that you are constantly bringing it up and advocating for yourself, because I know it seems sometimes small, but the repercussions of that can be really difficult to handle, and also could grow into more visible types of bullying.
Absolutely. Anna in the chat asks, did you ever see that happen to someone else and want to help but couldn't?
Bullying?
Yes.
Definitely. And this is why I really like to talk about the cycle that is bullying, because I have seen it happen when I was in middle school and high school and elementary school all the time, and I didn't speak up. And now I know, being on the other side of it, had I spoken up, had someone spoken up for me, it could have totally changed my life or someone else's life. And looking back, I know the reason I didn't speak up was because I was scared. I was scared that I would be bullied more. I was scared that I would be ostracized. I was scared that my friends would not think I was cool or something. But, you know, at the end of the day, it can really, really affect someone's life in a way that, you know, is so impossible to even comprehend. So taking that step, I know it's terrifying, is just so, so important. And again, if you can have like a friend or a few friends take that step with you, that's great as well. Like, there are many ways to go about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. We have another question from a student who would like to ask you. So her name is Carla. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her now.
Hi, love the poem. So my question is, how did you go about writing your book? I know you did say that you started it off almost as a diary, and it ended up being published.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. So like I said, I started writing it as a diary. And then when I started to realize, like, maybe this is something that I wanted to put out in the world, then I started to interview people. So I would talk to other young people that had been bullied, that had different experiences than mine. I would talk to some psychologists, some parents, because I wanted to try to really create this guide that could help as many people as possible. And then do my own research on the effects of cyberbullying, the effects of bullying on your mental health, so I could really, really work to creating a guide that is as perfect as possible. And once I had done that over the course of 3 years, I was in high school too, so like it wasn't full time. Then I went about self-publishing it, and that took a few months.
Incredible, thank you for that. A question from a parent who says, Larry Walker says, hello, Aija. As a parent, when your child opens up to you about being bullied, but asks you not to get involved because it will only make things worse, what would you suggest a parent do?
So this is such a difficult situation, and I'm really glad that you asked this question. You know, when I was in 3rd grade, I remember at the very beginning of what was happening, I told my mom, and she went into the school and spoke to the school, and they put me and the girl that was bullying me in a room and closed the door, and they said, you can't come out till you work it out, which is like I don't know if it still happens, but it was very, very common back then. And it was terrible, and it only made things worse, and it only made more people bully me, and I was just more and more ostracized. So when a kid says that, like, there is a lot of valid reason why, even though that's not true all the time, that it would make things worse, and even though at the end of the day, it is really important to take action and like make sure there is a plan in place to help your child. So I would say the biggest thing is, like I said earlier, creating that really tight-knit bond and that trusted bond where every single day you have these conversations. How is it affecting how you're feeling? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling, you know, anxious? Like, what are the physical symptoms that you're feeling? And, you know, what do you want to do about it? And over time, as long as you show that trust and that tight bond, I think even over a couple of days, you might help them get to a place where you both can go into the school together. I think that's something I wish had been done in my situation. I think had I been in the room with like the teacher and my mom, that might have changed things a bit, because I think part of that fear of like things getting worse is a lack of control. You know, oftentimes when young people are bullied, everything is already out of their control. And so to be in the room, to be learning to speak up and advocate for themselves along with the parent there, along with the teacher, the administrator, I think can be really helpful. But again, I think it is that journey of like building that trust, taking it step by step, creating kind of like an action plan, I think could be really great. And maybe that action plan builds to getting to the school. But yeah, I think that relationship is the most crucial thing, because you just don't want your child to stop telling you about what's going on.
Absolutely. And as a parent of a child heading into the tweens, I really personally appreciate the question and answer. We are going to take, I think there are 3 more questions in the chat, and we'll have to close it out there. I know we are running short on time. I want to make sure we get to everyone's questions, so we'll do them quickly, hopefully. But the last 3 are, hi Aija, I loved your poem, and this is student Ikalin. And she's saying, thanks so much for sharing. When you started sharing your story to schools around the US, were you ever shy about public speaking? And if so, how did you get over shyness?
Thank you for your question. And 100%. So as I mentioned, I used to have a lisp and a stutter, and I was bullied for the way I spoke. So like to stand up in front of 100 people was terrifying. And to be honest, it still kind of scares me. Like I'm looking at the participants, there's 102 people. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't see you in front of me, but this is still really scary. But you know, I said something earlier that I feel really strongly about, which is when you are speaking from your heart, when you are speaking from your soul, and like you are saying something that you so believe in your bones and you know you have to say, there is some sort of confidence that I think arrives. And I have messed up, I've said the wrong thing, I've forgotten a line while performing all the time. But because I'm speaking from this place within that is telling me I have to speak, I think that really, really helps me. And that's taken years to develop. When I first started speaking, I was so shy. So it really takes a long time. It takes practice. It takes testing your comfort zone. But, you know, if you are shy about public speaking, first of all, I think that's like the number 1 or number 2 fear in the world. That's very, very common. But don't give up on yourself. You know, just keep trying it. Maybe do it in front of like your sibling or your parents or a family member, and then a few friends, and build up to it, because in time you'll get more and more comfortable.
Amazing. Thank you. Really great advice, especially for our writers here. Hopefully aspiring public speakers as well. The last question from the chat is from Delilah, and she asks, hello, Aija. Where do you think you would be now if you didn't tell your mom? Do you think your life at the moment would be that different?
That is a great question. It's really hard to say because I have no way of knowing, but I don't think I would be in as good of a space mental health wise. When I told my mom, she also encouraged me to speak to a therapist and to take that step to talking to a professional. And that's something I really needed, and I didn't realize I needed at the time. But later on in my life, like in my later teen years, in my early 20s, it's something I was like, oh wow, no, there are a lot of things I need to work through. So I think had I not been able to speak to her about that and be encouraged and supported, which I was really lucky about because I know not everyone is supported to speak to a professional, I think I would be struggling more mental health wise. So I do think it's really important. And again, if there isn't someone in your life that you can talk to or that is helping you, there are so many options online of like therapy services or hotlines if you were in a crisis. And I just really encourage you to use some method of speaking to a professional.
Awesome. So we wanted to thank you so much for everyone for their questions. We are going to have another session after this. So if you did not get a chance to ask your question to Aija, we will have another opportunity to ask questions later on for more involvement. So I'm going to pass things back over to Shireen, and thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Again, like Jamika said, also, if you have any questions, And feel free to email them to us. I'm sure that we could also pass those along to Aija to answer as well. Aija, thank you so much for being here with us. This has been incredible. I don't want our time to end, but I know it is. I also wanted to say for our students who are here with us today, you will all be receiving a copy of Aija's book in the mail after this. So we're really excited to be able to share that with you. She's given us some of the tidbits, but you will each have your own copy after the session. So look out for that. Aija, again, thank you so much. And that's all for us.
Thank you. Thank you all for your questions and for joining me here today. This was so great, and I feel so lucky to have been able to talk with all of you.